Okay, picture this. You're all set for a really important drone flight. Maybe it's checking out a tricky roof situation or getting those amazing aerial shots the client absolutely needs.
Right.
Your drone, perfect condition, batteries, fully juiced, airspace, all clear. Everything seems totally greenlit.
The perfect setup.
But then this little seed of doubt. What if the biggest risk isn't, a bird strike or a crazy gust of wind or even the tech failing?
Okay, where are you going with this?
What if the real danger is you? Like maybe that kombucha you had for breakfast seems healthy, right?
Yeah, usually.
But maybe it had just enough alcohol fermenting in it to, well, raise eyebrows if something went wrong.
Huh, interesting angle. Kombucha.
Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe it's just that you only got like 3 hours of sleep last night.
Oof, rough night.
And that level of tiredness, it can actually make you as impaired cognitively as being legally drunk.
Wow. Okay, that's a strong comparison.
It really makes you rethink what fit to fly actually means, doesn't it? It's not always obvious.
Not at all. It challenges those gut feelings.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take a whole heap of important info today. It's all about drone pilot fitness, the rules, the regs in Canada, and we basically pull out the absolute must-know stuff.
We do the digging so you don't have to.
Exactly. Giving you a shortcut to being genuinely clued in, not just surface level, but really understanding the tricky bits.
Getting into the weeds a bit.
Our mission for this deep dive. We want to make you feel like an expert on what fit for duty truly means for drone pilots here in Canada.
Beyond just memorizing a rule number.
Totally. We're going to dig into some surprising facts, walk through some scenarios you might actually face, real world stuff.
Make it practical.
And give you some easy ways to lock this information in. Because honestly, we're designing this so you don't just learn it, you remember it.
Which in this field is pretty crucial. Remembering this stuff can literally save your bacon. Or your drone. Or your certificate.
Exactly. It could save your career, prevent an accident. So whether you're just flying for fun down at the park,
Hobbyist flying.
or you're aiming for those advanced commercial gigs, or maybe you're just fascinated by the rules behind flying robots,
Which is fair. It is fascinating.
understanding pilot fitness. It's absolutely key. We're going to show you why this isn't just about ticking boxes for Transport Canada.
It's much deeper than that.
It's about safety in the real world, protecting your passion for flying, and yeah, for a lot of folks, protecting their job. This is knowledge that actually makes a difference.
That's a perfect way to frame it. Because everything we're about to unpack really boils down to one central idea.
Yeah.
The drone's important, obviously, but the focus is squarely on you, the pilot.
Right, the human element.
Exactly. When we talk fit to fly for drone pilots in Canada, we are absolutely not talking about a suggestion or a nice-to-have best practice.
It's not optional.
Not in the slightest. This is the law. It's written right into the Canadian Aviation Regulations, the CARS, specifically Section 901.19.
CARS 901.19.
And it's backed up by the broader, very powerful Aeronautics Act. So these aren't just guidelines. They are legally binding requirements.
For everyone, recreational pilots too.
For all drone pilots in Canada. It doesn't matter if you're flying a tiny thing for fun or a huge rig for work. You have to follow these rules. And the consequences for not following them, they're serious.
Okay, legally binding, that definitely gets my attention. So what's the actual core principle here? What does CARS 901.19 say?
It's actually remarkably clear and pretty concise. It states, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, but the core is, no pilot shall operate an RPAS if they are under the influence of alcohol or drugs such that their faculties are impaired.
Okay, faculties are impaired.
That's the key phrase. That single sentence is the foundation for everything related to pilot fitness for RPAS, which is the official term, remotely piloted aircraft systems.
Right, RPAS.
And notice where it places the responsibility, squarely, unequivocally, on the pilot's shoulders.
Okay, impaired. That feels like a really broad term. Does that just mean, having had a few too many drinks or using illegal drugs? Because I know for pilots of actual planes,
And aviation, yeah.
impairment covers way more than just booze. Is it the same deal for drones?
That's a really, really crucial question.
Yeah.
Because yes, it absolutely does go much further. Impairment for a drone pilot under CARS 901.19. It's way beyond just alcohol and illegal substances.
Okay.
It means any reduction, any at all, in your physical or mental faculties that could possibly affect your judgment.
Makes sense.
Your coordination, how you perceive things, your reaction time, basically anything that makes you less sharp.
So what kind of things are we talking about then?
Well, the obvious ones are still there, alcohol and drugs.
Okay.
But it also explicitly includes things like being severely tired, fatigue,
Okay, fatigue counts.
being sick, like actually ill. Significant emotional stress is another one.
Wow, okay. Stress too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And critically, the effects of perfectly legal prescription medications, even common stuff you buy over the counter, like cold medicine.
So it's a really wide net.
It's incredibly broad.
Yeah.
The bottom line is this. If something impacts your ability to operate that drone safely and effectively, you are legally considered impaired, and therefore you are unfit to fly. Full stop.
Wow. Okay, that is broad. And who gets to make that final call? Is it like the company you work for, your supervisor on the job site? Who decides if you're impaired or not?
This point is absolutely critical. Cannot stress this enough. The pilot in command, the PIC of that drone, they are solely and personally responsible for determining their own fitness to fly.
Solely. Nobody else.
Nobody else holds the final legal responsibility. And importantly, this responsibility also extends to making sure any crew members helping you out, like visual observers, are also fit.
Ah, okay. So it's you and your team.
Exactly. So even if your boss or the client or a supervisor is breathing down your neck saying, come on, we got to fly, you look fine.
Yeah, the pressure is real sometimes.
Immense pressure sometimes, doesn't matter. The ultimate legal liability, the final decision, it rests entirely on your shoulders as the pilot.
That's huge.
It is. And that's why self-assessment, being really honest with yourself before every single flight, isn't just, a good idea. It's absolutely paramount. Your drone certificate, your insurance, your legal standing, maybe even your whole career. It's all riding on that assessment.
Okay, so let's connect this back to the listener. Why should you care so much about this? Maybe you just fly a little DJI Mini for fun, capture some family videos. Does this really apply?
It absolutely applies. Because even if you're just out for a casual flight, having fun with a small consumer drone, these exact same rules are in force.
No exceptions for hobbyists.
None. If something goes sideways, maybe a minor crash, a near miss, even just someone complaining about your flying Transport Canada will investigate. And part of that investigation will absolutely include looking at whether you are fit to fly at that specific time.
Okay, so even for fun flights, it matters. And for pros.
For professional operators, the stakes are exponentially higher, massively higher. Imagine an accident happens, and the investigation finds that pilot impairment was a factor.
Nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. You could lose your RPAS certificate immediately, maybe suspended, maybe permanently revoked. You could be facing huge fines, these things called administrative monetary penalties, AMPs.
Heard of those? They can be big bucks.
Thousands, potentially tens of thousands. And in really serious cases, you could even face prosecution under the Aeronautics Act itself.
Wow. Criminal charges.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Then there are the insurance implications. Your claim might be denied. And think about the damage to your reputation, losing client trust.
Yeah, that could kill a business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So understanding this stuff isn't just about, dodging penalties. It's fundamentally about real-world safety for you, for the public. And it's about protecting your passion, your investment, maybe your entire livelihood. It's serious business.
All right, you've definitely convinced me of the stakes. Let's dive into one of the big ones, probably the rule most people have heard of, even outside aviation: alcohol. And specifically, that infamous 12-hour rule in Canada. Where did that even come from? Is there like an origin story?
Oh, absolutely. And it's actually kind of a cool bit of aviation history.
Okay.
It wasn't just dreamed up by bureaucrats in an office somewhere.
Okay.
It really grew out of hard-won experience. Go back to the 1940s, the sort of golden age of propeller planes.
Right.
Pilots, back then, particularly in the U.S., they came up with a simple, catchy rule of thumb. 8 hours bottle-to-throttle.
8 hours bottle-to-throttle. I like it.
Catchy. Super catchy, easy to remember, and it just spread through the pilot community. Eventually, it wasn't just an informal saying anymore. It became official policy for manned aircraft with the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration in the States.
Ah, so the U.S. formalized the 8-hour rule.
They did. And because the U.S. is such a big player, that 8-hour standard influenced international guidelines too, through ICA, that's the International Civil Aviation Organization, the UN body that sets global aviation standards.
Okay, 8 hours seems pretty standard then. So Canada just adopted that. We went with the 8-hour ICAO recommendation.
Ah, well, this is where Canada decided to carve its own path, a more conservative path, actually.
Oh, how so?
While lots of countries did adopt the 8-hour rule, or something very close to it, Transport Canada went further. They mandated a 12-hour minimum period between your last drink and operating any aircraft. And that includes RPAS, drones.
12 hours, so 4 hours longer than the U.S. and the international standard.
Exactly. It makes Canada one of the most cautious, most conservative aviation regulators globally when it comes to alcohol consumption before flight. It's a very clear, safety first, no ambiguity stance.
That's really interesting. So you could almost say Canada gives your brain an extra 4 hours to sober up compared to what your liver might technically need according to the old rule. That's a good way to remember why it's 12 here.
That's a great mental hook for it, yeah. More time for the brain.
But, okay, this 12-hour rule, is it like a magic cutoff? Once 12 hours and 1 minute have passed, are you automatically good to fly? Green light no matter what?
That is a super common misunderstanding, and it's probably one of the most critical nuances for pilots, especially newer ones, to grasp. The 12-hour rule is just a minimum threshold. It is not an automatic all clear.
Okay, minimum, not automatic.
Exactly. Remember the core rule from CARS 901.109, you must not fly if impaired by any means.
Right, by any means. Not just alcohol within 12 hours.
Precisely. So even if it's been 13, 14, 15 hours since your last drink, if you are still feeling the effects, maybe you're groggy, have a headache, feel nauseous, or you just don't feel mentally sharp.
Like a hangover, basically.
Exactly, like a hangover, even a mild one. You are still considered unfit to fly under the regulations, flying in that state. That's a violation.
So the clock isn't the only thing that matters.
Not at all. Transport Canada expects you to assess your actual present moment impairment, your cognitive state right now, not just look at your watch. The 12-hour rule gets you to the starting line, maybe, but your actual physiological state determines if you can actually start the race.
Okay, let's make this real. Scenario time. Let's call it the wedding hangover. Big wedding Saturday night, you celebrated, maybe had drinks from, say, 6 p.m. until midnight.
Sounds like a good wedding.
Maybe too good. You've got a critical drone job Sunday morning, say a thermal inspection of a big commercial roof scheduled for 9 a.m. You wake up at 7:30 a.m., you feel rough. Definitely groggy, head's a bit foggy. You're not drunk anymore, but you're not feeling great. The client's waiting. Can you fly that drone at 9 a.m.?
Oof, absolutely not. No way. You're caught by the rules in like 2 different ways here.
Okay, break it down.
First, the simple math. Midnight Saturday to 9 a.m. Sunday. That's only 9 hours.
Right, not
So you haven't even cleared Canada's mandatory 12-hour minimum. That's an immediate no-go right there. Game over.
Okay, fail number 1.
But second, and this is just as, if not more important, you said you feel groggy. Foggy head.
Yeah.
That lingering grogginess, that mental fog, that is impairment under the CARS definition. Your subjective feeling of, oh, I'm not drunk anymore. Completely irrelevant.
Doesn't matter how you feel you compare to being drunk.
Doesn't matter. What matters is your objective fitness, the actual state of your mental and physical faculties right now. And groggy means they're compromised. Trying to fly that drone, that's a direct violation of 901.119.
And dangerous, presumably.
Hugely dangerous. Your judgment is off. Your reaction time is slower. If anything went wrong, even a small thing, and they found out you flew in that state, you're facing serious penalties. Losing your certificate is definitely on the table. That thermal inspection just became a very, very expensive mistake.
Okay, that's pretty clear cut. What about something way more subtle, where you might not even feel anything?
Let's call this one just a taste at lunch.
Regard a big client lunch. Day before a major drone mapping project for them in the afternoon. The client's really pushing this rare, local vintage wine. Just try a sip. You have to.
Awkward situation.
Totally. So to be polite, build rapport, you have maybe 2 small sips, barely anything. Your flight is scheduled for 2 p.m. that same day. Can you fly?
Still no. And this scenario perfectly highlights just how strict and unforgiving that 12-hour rule is.
Even for just a couple of sips.
Even for a single sip. The moment any alcohol passes your lips, if you are the pilot in command, that 12-hour clock starts ticking. There's no minimum amount, oh, it was only a taste exemption.
0 tolerance on starting the clock.
Absolutely 0 tolerance.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you feel perfectly fine. It doesn't matter if a breathalyzer would show 0. You consumed alcohol within the 12-hour window.
Yeah.
Flying at 2 p.m. after sipping wine at lunch, even a tiny bit. That's illegal under Canadian aviation regulations.
Wow. Okay, so it's not about how much you drank within the window. It's that you drank at all.
Precisely. Any amount starts the clock.
Got it. So a really simple way to remember this, a good memory aid. 12 hours to fly or let it pass by.
Perfect. Simple, clear, no ambiguity.
No loopholes, just a little bit, 12 hours minimum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like we said, so many people make that mistake. They assume 12 hours is the magic number, the automatic green light.
Yeah.
Understanding that it's just the first hurdle. and your actual feeling of alertness is the second more important one. That's a huge aha moment. It's what separates someone just following a rule from someone truly internalizing the safety culture.
It really demands that honest self-assessment.
Absolutely. You have to be truthful with yourself about how you feel, not just about what the clock says.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense for alcohol.
Yeah.
But you mentioned impairment is broader than that. Let's talk about other drugs and medications. This feels even trickier, especially here in Canada with, cannabis being legal.
Yeah, this is definitely an area where things get more complex, and it's super relevant for Canadian pilots.
Right.
When cannabis was legalized back in 2018,
Right.
there was a lot of confusion. We saw many new drone pilots, understandably maybe, thinking, hey, it's legal to buy and use recreationally, so it must be fine to fly after using it, right?
Seems logical on the surface.
It does, but Transport Canada had to come out very quickly and very clearly state, nope, their stance is zero impairment tolerance, regardless of legality.
Zero impairment tolerance. Okay.
So the fact that cannabis is legal, or that your doctor prescribed you an opioid, or you bought that allergy pill over the counter, it has absolutely zero bearing on whether you are fit to fly an RPAS.
So legal does not equal fly legal.
That's the perfect way to put it. Legal does not mean fly legal. The only question that matters is, does this substance impair your faculties, yes or no?
Okay, so even if I have a prescription for something that helps me manage a condition or cannabis is illegal, I still can't fly if it impairs me in any way. What about edibles? Their effects are different, right? Last longer?
Correct, on both counts. Legal status
Irrelevant to fitness.
and edibles. Yeah, they're a whole different ball game, and pilots need to be especially careful.
Why edibles specifically?
Because the effects often take much longer to kick in, sometimes an hour or two, and then they last much longer than smoking or vaping. We're talking potentially 6 to 24 hours, sometimes even more.
Wow, 24 hours.
Yeah, depending on the dose, your own body chemistry, the specific product, it varies hugely. And here's the really tricky part.
Yeah.
Even long after you stop feeling the main psychoactive effects, maybe you feel totally fine.
Yeah.
Your judgment, your perception of distance and speed, your spatial awareness, even your reaction time can still be subtly but significantly impaired.
Without you even realizing it.
Often without you realizing it at all. But that subtle impairment is exactly the kind of thing that can lead to a critical error during a flight. Transport Canada expects objective fitness, not just you saying, yeah, I feel okay now.
Man, that's sobering. And we've actually seen real-world examples of this kind of thing going badly wrong, haven't we? I remember hearing about an incident in Japan. Drunk droning.
Ah, yes, the Japan incident. That's a stark but really effective cautionary tale. Back in 2018, this guy got arrested, faced criminal charges, actually for flying his drone while he was clearly drunk.
What happened?
Apparently, he was trying to fly it from inside his house, lost control, and crashed it into his neighbor's property. Classic impaired operation.
Yikes.
And that incident, partly, spurred Japan to become one of the first countries to explicitly outlaw flying drones while intoxicated with really heavy penalties.
So it shows even small drones.
Exactly. Even small, seemingly harmless recreational drones can lead to big, serious consequences if you fly them while impaired.
Yeah.
The risk is absolutely real, and the legal hammer can come down hard.
Okay, another powerful reminder. So for cannabis, maybe the simplest memory hook is just, if you're high, don't fly.
Couldn't be clear. Direct, easy to remember, covers the core principle.
Let's test that with a scenario. Let's call it the legal edible. You take a totally legal 10 milligram THC gummy at, say, 10 p.m. one night. Maybe to help you sleep, maybe just to relax. You have a drone job the next morning, a residential roof inspection booked for 8 a.m. You wake up, you feel fine, maybe even well-rested. Can you legally and safely fly that drone? Based on everything we just talked about, that sounds like a definite no, even though the gummy was legal and you feel okay.
Right.
Those THC effects from an edible can linger for a really long time. Your judgment, your spatial awareness could still be off for that 8 a.m. flight, even if you don't perceive it.
Precisely. That's the danger. And imagine if something did go wrong. A minor crash, maybe even just a complaint from someone. If an investigation follows and post-incident toxicology tests show THC metabolites in your system.
Which they probably would from an edible the night before.
Very likely. Then you'd be legally deemed unfit at the time of the flight. And you'd be facing those serious enforcement actions, regardless of how well-rested or clear-headed you felt.
Wow, okay. So, moving beyond illegal drugs and cannabis, what about those perfectly legal medications, over-the-counter stuff, prescriptions? You said those are hidden dangers. Yeah, I've heard whispers about this too. It's not just the obvious stuff pilots need to worry about, right? Even common cold medicine.
That's absolutely right. And this is a huge area people often overlook. Any medication, doesn't matter if your doctor prescribed it or you bought it at the pharmacy, any medication that could potentially affect your judgment, reaction time, coordination, vision, or even just make you drowsy, it automatically disqualifies you from flying.
Any medication. That sounds like a lot of things.
It is a lot of things. Think about common antihistamines, the ones that make you drowsy and cold, and allergy meds. Benadryl is a classic example.
Yeah, that stuff knocks me out.
Exactly. Certain painkillers, especially opioids or anything with codeine, anti-anxiety meds, sleep aids, obviously, even some muscle relaxants. The list is really long.
So the danger is they subtly mess with your brain and body, even if they're legal.
Precisely. They can subtly but profoundly impact your cognitive function, your motor skills, the very things you rely on to fly a drone safely.
Okay, so how is a pilot supposed to know what's okay and what's not? Is there, like, a list from Transport Canada, a do not fly while taking these meds list?
Unfortunately, no. There isn't a single comprehensive banned list, which, you're right, makes it tricky.
Was it you?
The responsibility falls entirely back on you, the pilot. You have to meticulously check the side effects of anything you take, read the label, talk to the pharmacist.
Be honest with yourself about how it affects you.
Absolutely honest self-assessment. And, crucially, if you have any doubt whatsoever, you must consult a medical professional. But here's the catch.
Yeah.
You need to talk to a doctor or pharmacist who actually understands aviation medical standards. Transport Canada generally follows ICAO principles here. So any medication known to mess with judgment, reaction time, motor control, or cause dizziness or drowsiness, that's a huge red flag for flying.
So my regular family doctor might not know the specific risks for pilots.
They might not fully appreciate the very high level of vigilance and precise control needed for RPAS operations. It's different from, say, driving a car.
Yeah.
You need to explicitly tell them, I fly drones professionally, or I fly drones recreationally, when you discuss any medication, even over-the-counter stuff.
Okay, let's test this. Scenario. Cold meds in the field. Feeling rough. Got a nasty cold. Before heading out to an important infrastructure inspection, I pop a couple of those standard over-the-counter cold and flu capsules. I know they have a drowsy antihistamine in them, but I figure I can push through. Can I fly?
Nope, absolutely not. That's a clear violation of your fitness for duty.
Even if I think I can handle it.
Doesn't matter what you think. Diphenhydramine, that's the active ingredient in many of those drowsy meds like Benadryl, is specifically known to cause significant drowsiness. It impairs coordination, slows reaction time, even though you can buy it anywhere.
Yeah.
Its effects directly impair your fitness to fly. If you had even a minor incident, and it was traced back to sluggish reflexes because of that cold med, you'd be fully liable.
Right.
Taking that medication means you must self-ground, period.
Okay. What about medical cannabis? This is a tricky one in Canada. Say you're legally prescribed a low THC cannabis oil for anxiety. You take it regularly, it works well, you feel totally functional, maybe even better than without it.
Okay, manages the condition.
Right. And you're scheduled for a really critical flight, maybe inspecting a power substation. Are you fit to fly?
This is where the regulations are really clear, even if it seems counterintuitive. Despite it being legal, prescribed, and you feeling functional, the answer for an RPAS pilot under Canadian rules is still no.
Still no. Even if it helps the anxiety that might otherwise impair you.
Still no. Any level of impairment from cannabis or any impairing substance is disqualifying under SCAS 901.19. There's no exception carved out for medical cannabis use when it comes to flying a drone.
So no special allowance?
None. Your duty as PIC is to recognize the potential for impairment, self-ground, document why, and tell your client or employer. The only theoretical exception, and this is extremely rare and involves a ton of medical scrutiny, would be getting explicit clearance from a special Transport Canada-approved aviation medical examiner.
Which isn't going to happen for most people.
Highly unlikely for most RPAS pilots.
Okay.
So the default rule is clear. If it impairs, even if it's prescribed, you don't fly.
And what if you mix things? Sounds like a bad idea generally, but
Yeah.
let's say you're fighting that cold with cold meds, but you're also taking a prescription stimulant, maybe for ADHD. You might feel kind of wired, maybe jittery, but you're not sure if you're actually alert or just agitated. Fly or no fly?
Definitely no fly. Mixing medications, especially things like depressants like drowsy cold meds and stimulants, that's called polypharmacy, and it can lead to wildly unpredictable, often dangerously multiplied effects.
Worse than either drug alone.
Often, Yes. You could feel overly stimulated but unable to focus, severely anxious, confused, or find your decision-making is way off. These unpredictable interactions completely trash your ability to make sound, timely, precise judgments needed for flying.
So just don't risk it.
Never risk it. You are absolutely not fit to fly unless a medical professional who understands both the specific drug interactions and the demands of piloting has specifically cleared you for flight duty. When in doubt, always, always err on the side of grounding yourself.
Okay, so that memory aid for this whole section seems really vital. If I'm drowsy or dizzy, that drone stays busy on the ground.
That's a great one. Covers a lot of the common medication side effects perfectly.
It really hammers home that awareness of your own body.
It does. And speaking of awareness, we also need to touch on unintentional impairment. Because under the Aeronautics Act, that zero-tolerance principle means ignorance is no excuse. Oops, I didn't know it was impaired, is not a valid defense.
So even if you accidentally get exposed to something...
You're still potentially liable as the pilot.
Okay, let's make that concrete. Say I'm carefully cleaning the fancy sensor on my drone. Using a really strong solvent cleaner in my small workshop, maybe the ventilation isn't great.
Okay.
After 20 minutes, I feel a bit lightheaded. Maybe my eyes are stinging. I kind of shrug it off. Just the fumes. And then I pack up to go fly my next mission. Am I good to go?
Nope, definitely not good to go. That's a classic case of unintentional impairment. Those solvent fumes causing lightheadedness, dizziness, maybe slightly blurred vision.
Yeah.
That is impairment.
Even though I didn't mean to inhale them.
Doesn't matter if it's intentional or not. Your faculties, your judgment, your coordination are compromised by those fumes. The risk of making an error during the flight is way higher. Even though it's accidental exposure, if you choose to fly while feeling those effects, you are flying impaired and you're liable.
Okay, here's the one that blew my mind when I first read about it. Kombucha. I drink kombucha. It's supposed to be healthy, but you're saying it could actually ground a pilot or even cause a failed breathalyzer test. How?
It sounds wild, but it's absolutely true. It's a fantastic example of these sort of obscure, unexpected risks. Most commercially bottled kombucha is very low alcohol, yes.
Right.
But some types, especially if they're raw, unpasteurized, or maybe they've been sitting out in the warm sun and kept fermenting, they can naturally reach over 0.5% alcohol by volume, sometimes even higher.
High enough to register.
High enough that there are documented cases seriously of people, including pilots and professional athletes, failing breathalyzer tests unexpectedly after drinking kombucha they thought was totally harmless.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of a fun fact, but it's also a really serious caution for pilots. The memory hook writes itself. Kombucha is not just bubbly tea. It might be a fermented fitness fail.
Wow. Okay. Mental note made. Check the kombucha.
Always be aware of everything you consume before a flight, no matter how innocent it seems.
That is genuinely incredible. Okay, another slightly gray area. What if you're at a party or just hanging out and other people nearby are smoking cannabis? You don't smoke any yourself, but you're in the same room for a couple of hours. Next morning, you feel totally fine, 100% clear-headed. Can you fly?
Yeah, this is definitely a tricky gray zone. Technically, just being exposed to secondhand cannabis smoke usually results in very, very low, often undetectable levels of THC in a non-user system.
So probably okay.
Probably, but the professionally advised conservative approach. Proceed with extreme caution, or better yet, just postpone the flight if you can.
Why postpone if it's probably okay?
Because if you were in, say, a small, poorly ventilated room for a long time with heavy smoke, there's a small theoretical chance that prolonged exposure could lead to detectable trace levels of THC metabolites in your system.
Oh, I see. So if something went wrong later.
Exactly. If there was an incident and a post-incident toxicology test did somehow pick up even trace amounts, it could raise awkward questions about impairment, even if you felt fine and didn't use it yourself. It puts you in a very ambiguous, risky position.
So the safest bet is just avoid the ambiguity.
Precisely. Postpone the flight, or maybe switch out with another crew member if that's an option. And definitely document why you made that decision. Postpone flight due to potential secondhand smoke exposure concerns. That shows incredible judgment and covers you completely. It avoids any future what-ifs.
Man, these really are the obscure or overlooked rules that could totally trip up even a careful pilot. Knowing these edge cases feels like the difference between just knowing the rules and truly mastering flight safety.
That's exactly it. They highlight how comprehensive fitness to fly really is in Canadian aviation. It forces you to think about all the potential influences on your ability to perform safely, not just the obvious ones.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. We've talked a lot about substances, alcohol, drugs, medications. But what about something most people experience but maybe don't think of as impairment in the same way? Fatigue. You mentioned Transport Canada treats it just as seriously.
They do, and for very good reason. Fatigue is often called the silent impairment because it creeps up on you. But the science behind its effects is honestly shocking, way more impactful than most people realize.
Shocking how?
Well, numerous studies, really solid research, have shown that being awake for just 18 hours straight,
Okay, 18 hours. Like getting up at 6 a.m. and still being awake at midnight? Pretty common.
very common. Being awake for that long impairs your reaction time, your decision-making, your overall cognitive function, as much as having a blood alcohol content, a BAC, of 0.05%.
0.05%. Isn't that the legal driving limit in many places?
It is. So just being tired after a long day can make you as impaired as someone who legally shouldn't be driving.
Wow. Okay, and what if you pull an all-nighter?
If you push it to 24 hours awake, your impairment level is equivalent to having a 0.10% BAC.
0.10%. That's significantly over the driving limit everywhere.
Absolutely. That's legally impaired, no question. So the feeling of being totally wiped out after skipping a night's sleep, it's not just uncomfortable. It's a state of profound cognitive impairment.
That is genuinely stunning. The comparison is so direct. So the memory hook here is powerful. If you wouldn't drink a beer, don't skip sleep and fly. That really drives it home.
It does. It puts fatigue on the same level as alcohol in terms of risk.
But what about caffeine? You know, you're exhausted, pulled that all-nighter, maybe finishing a client proposal. But you slam back a huge coffee, maybe an energy drink. Doesn't that fix it? Doesn't that make you alert enough to fly?
Nope, not even close. This is a classic track called masked fatigue.
Mask fatigue.
Yeah, caffeine energy drinks. They don't actually restore alertness or fix the underlying impairment caused by sleep deprivation. They just cover it up temporarily.
So you feel more awake.
You might feel more awake, maybe even jittery or wired because of the stimulant. But your core judgment, your ability to handle complex problems quickly, your reaction time, those are still significantly degraded. Caffeine just masks the symptoms of being tired. It doesn't eliminate the impairment.
So you might feel alert, but still make bad decisions.
Exactly. You might even feel overly confident because the caffeine's kicked in, but your actual performance is still poor. The only real cure for fatigue is sleep. The only safe choice when you're truly tired is to delay the flight, get proper rest, and prioritize being actually fit over just feeling artificially awake.
Okay, let's run another scenario. Super common for drone pros, I bet. Sleep deprivation after overnight charging.
Ah, yes, the battery grind.
Totally. You spend all night charging dozens of batteries, maybe doing critical firmware updates, planning a complex BVLOS flight that has to happen at dawn. You manage to scrape together maybe 2 hours of really broken sleep.
Been there. It's brutal.
Your high-profile client is already on site waiting. The weather is absolute perfect, maybe the only window you'll get all week. The pressure is immense. Do you fly?
Under no circumstances. Absolutely not. With only 2 hours of sleep, we just established your cognitive function, your reaction time, your judgment are severely compromised. Functionally, you are equivalent to someone legally impaired by alcohol.
Even with perfect weather and client pressure?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is exactly where that internal I am safe checklist becomes crucial. You must recognize the F for fatigue is flashing bright red. You document it, grounded due to severe fatigue, 2 hours sleep, and you postpone the mission, period.
That sounds like a tough call to make in the moment.
It is a tough call.
Yeah.
But no weather window, no client contract, no amount of money is worth the catastrophic risk of causing an accident because you flew while significantly impaired by fatigue. Their professional integrity, public safety, your certificate, they all depend on making that hard but correct decision.
Okay. What about travel fatigue? Say you fly across the country, maybe you take a red-eye flight for an inspection job. You land, grab maybe 3 hours of lousy sleep in a hotel. You're due to fly a critical mission that afternoon. You really want to impress the client, stay on schedule, fly or no fly.
Still no fly. That scenario is like a perfect storm of human factors causing impairment.
How so?
First, you got jet lag. Crossing time zones throws your whole internal body clock, your circadian rhythm, completely out of whack. Your brain and body are literally out of sync with the local time.
Right, feeling fuzzy and off schedule.
Then you add poor, fragmented sleep on top of that. Plus, air travel itself is dehydrating, which also impacts cognitive function.
So it all adds up.
It adds up big time. Jet lag plus bad sleep plus dehydration, a potent recipe for impaired thinking, reduced situational awareness, and significantly slowed reaction times. Travel fatigue is a major human factor. Makes you totally unfit for duty, even if zero alcohol or drugs are involved. Your brain just isn't working at 100%.
It's becoming so clear that fitness is way more holistic than just avoiding substances. It really is about your entire state of being, which leads us to mental health. This might not be on the exam in the same way, maybe, but it feels like a really important and valid part of fitness.
Absolutely. And it's an aspect that's often underestimated or maybe pilots feel awkward discussing, but it's critically important. Things like severe anxiety, clinical depression, yeah, just profound emotional distress.
Like going through a really tough time personally.
Exactly. Dealing with acute grief after a loss, or even just extreme professional burnout. All of these can significantly impair your judgment. They can shorten your attention span, make it harder to focus, diminish your overall situational awareness, your ability to see the big picture while flying.
So it's not just about feeling sad, it actually impacts your piloting skills.
It absolutely can. As the pilot in command, you have a clear ethical and legal duty to stand down, to not fly, if you are not mentally prepared for that flight. Even if you're physically fine, haven't touched a drop of alcohol or any drugs, your psychological readiness, your ability to stay calm, process information clearly, and make rational decisions, especially under pressure, that's every bit as vital as being sober and rested.
Let's imagine a really tough scenario. Emotional shock. You wake up one morning to terrible news. Maybe a close friend or family member was in a serious accident, or there's some other major personal tragedy unfolding.
Devastating news.
You're understandably completely reeling, feeling distracted, scattered, maybe tense, just totally not yourself. But you have a complex commercial real estate drone shoot scheduled in 3 hours. Do you fly?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
This scenario hits the E and the I'm safe checklist squarely.
No.
E for emotion.
Right. Emotion.
That kind of acute mental distress, shock, grief, intense anxiety. It directly impacts your ability to think clearly and make rational decisions. It compromises your alertness, your focus, your situational awareness. Even if you're physically okay, haven't taken anything, you are not mentally fit to safely operate an RPAS.
So what's the procedure then?
Your clear duty is to self-ground, document it, grounded due to acute emotional distress impacting fitness, reschedule the mission, and communicate professionally with your client, explaining that safety protocols require a delay. Your mental state is a fundamental non-negotiable part of your fitness responsibility.
You mentioned the I Am Safe checklist there. We've referenced it a few times. Can you just quickly run through what that stands for again? It seems like a really core tool here, especially for remembering all these different factors.
Absolutely. I Am Safe is a fantastic mnemonic, widely used in all types of aviation. It's a quick, systematic way to do that crucial self-check before you fly. It stands for I am illness. Am I feeling sick? Any symptoms? M, medication. Am I taking anything, a prescription or over-the-counter, that could impair me?
Yeah.
Stress? Am I under unusual psychological pressure? Financial worries, work stress, personal stuff. Alcohol. Have I had any alcohol in the last 12 hours? Am I feeling any residual effects? F, fatigue. Am I properly rested? Do I feel alert? Or am I tired? E, emotion. Am I experiencing any strong emotions, anger, sadness, extreme excitement that could distract me or affect my judgment?
Illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, emotion.
Got it.
And this wasn't just like thought up in a brainstorming session, right? You mentioned it has a pretty serious origin story tied to real world safety.
Yeah, and understand where it came from really gives it weight. I'm Safe wasn't some academic exercise. It was developed directly by analyzing patterns of human error found in actual aircraft crash investigations.
Such investigations, really.
Yes, particularly in general aviation smaller planes. The accident data, time and time again, showed that pilot fitness issues were a major contributing factor in something like 70% or more of accidents.
70%. More than equipment failure or weather.
Often, yes. Things like pilots flying while overly stressed or tired or after taking medication they shouldn't have. The I Am Safe checklist basically distilled the key lessons learned from those tragedies into a simple, actionable checklist.
Wow. Okay, so a really stark but maybe effective memory hook for this is every letter in I'm Safe is backed by a body count. Don't skip the checklist.
It's blunt, but it underlines the seriousness and the proven value of using it. It's not bureaucratic nonsense.
And the practical advice, the memory aid to use. I'm safe to fly. Use this before every mission. If any letter flags a concern, you're not ready.
Exactly. That's the action. Treat it like part of your essential pre-flight. If any one of those letters gives you pause, makes you think, maybe not, then the answer is you're not ready to fly. It's a tool born from tragedy designed to prevent more tragedies. It's about discipline and making the right call before you launch.
Okay, so we've thoroughly covered personal fitness. But you hinted earlier that it's not just about you, the pilot. Your responsibility actually extends to your crew. That feels like a really important point for anyone working in a team.
It's absolutely critical, and yeah, it's something easily overlooked, especially by newer pilots, perhaps focused only on their own readiness.
Well,
Under CARS 901.19 and also under the broader principle of duty of care in aviation.
okay.
You, as the pilot in command, are legally on the hook not just for your own fitness, but for ensuring the fitness of your entire crew.
Entire crew. So like my visual observer, my
Yeah.
payload operator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Visual observers, co-pilots, sensor operators, anyone who plays a critical role in the safety or execution of that drone mission. The implication is huge. If any one of those critical crew members is impaired by alcohol, drugs, fatigue, stress, whatever,
Yeah.
then you, the PIC, must ground the entire operation immediately. You cannot proceed.
Wow. So if my spotter is hungover, I'm the one who has to stop the flight.
Yes, and if you don't stop it, and something happens, you could be held just as liable as the impaired crew member, maybe even more so, because you are the one in command who allowed it.
Okay, let's hit a scenario trap here. Impaired crew member, your visual observer, who you absolutely need for this complex BVOS flight you're about to do, shows up late, you smell alcohol on their breath, they get defensive, hey, I only had a couple last night, way more than 12 hours ago, I'm good, trust me.
Yeah.
What's the call?
Ground the operation. Immediately. No hesitation, no debate.
Even if they insist they're fine and past the 12 hours.
Doesn't matter. First, the smell of alcohol is a huge red flag suggesting recent consumption or lingering effects. Second, your visual observer is a critical safety element. Literally your eyes on the sky for that BVLOS mission. Their alertness and judgment cannot be compromised.
So even if I'm perfectly fit?
Even if you are 100% fit, if a critical member of your safety system is impaired, the entire mission's safety and legality are shot. As the PIC, you are responsible for their fitness too. If you fly with them impaired and there's an incident, you could lose your certificate, not just theirs. It's a shared responsibility. But the buck stops with the PIC.
Okay. What if it's more subtle? Your colleague, normally solid, just seems a bit off, maybe sluggish, slightly buzzed, but they insist they're fine. It's 11 a.m., they say they stopped drinking ages ago, definitely past 12 hours. The mission is critical, maybe you're short-staffed, pressure's on, do you fly with them?
Still no. Even if they're technically past the 12-hour clock, your job as PIC is to objectively assess their current fitness. If you observe any signs, sluggishness, poor focus, impaired judgment, just not being sharp, you are legally and ethically obligated to intervene.
So my gut feeling, my observation, overrides their claim.
Your professional judgment as PIC absolutely overrides their self-assessment in this case, especially if you have doubts. Their insistence, "I'm fine," isn't enough. If you let them fly while impaired, even subtly, you share the liability under CARS for failing to ensure crew fitness. Safety always trumps schedule or feeling awkward about confronting a colleague.
And this applies even on those longer remote jobs. Like imagine you're camping with the crew out in the bush for a multi-day project.
Right. Remote ops have their own challenges.
After a long day's flying, the team has a few beers around the campfire. One crew member, maybe your main visual observer, had quite a few. They wake up early, 6 a.m., wanting to get started, insisting they're good to go for the first flight scheduled at 7 a.m. As the team lead in PIC, what do?
You have to step in. As the PIC and team lead, your duty is clear. You either delay that first flight involving that crew member until you are certain they are fit, which might be well past 7 a.m., or you need to rearrange duties so someone else who is definitely fit takes their role.
Even if they technically hit 12 hours.
Even then, you saw their consumption the night before. You need to apply sound judgment. Given the amount, the short turnaround, the early start, the risk of residual impairment is high. Your job isn't just about ticking the 12-hour box. It's about ensuring actual fitness and safety, especially in remote settings where help is far away and the social dynamics can sometimes blue judgment. Clear communication about expectation before the beers come out is also key on those jobs.
This really hammers home that PIC responsibility is huge. But what happens when the pressure isn't from a colleague, but from above, from your boss or the client? They're pushing you to fly, but you know you're not fit. This brings us to that crucial idea, the duty to decline.
Yes, and understanding this duty to decline is incredibly empowering. It can literally save your career.
Yeah.
Let's use a classic scenario. The supervisor's pressure.
Okay.
Your operations manager calls, frantic. Emergency! High priority infrastructure inspection needed right now. Get the drone up.
Sounds urgent.
But book.
Yeah.
You just came from the dentist an hour ago, had a procedure, took a prescription painkiller with codeine. You're feeling kind of fuzzy, definitely not sharp. Do you say yes?
Okay, based on everything we've said, absolutely not. You have to refuse. And you mentioned documenting it is key too.
Exactly right, on
Yeah.
both counts.
Mhm.
This is where your professionalism truly matters. The pilot in command you holds the final, ultimate legal responsibility for that flight's safety, not your supervisor, not the company owner, not the client paying the bill. You.
So refusing isn't being difficult.
Refusing an unsafe flight is not weakness or insubordination. It is a fundamental legal skill. It's a demonstration of professional leadership and commitment to safety.
And here's a really interesting bit.
Transport Canada actually views a documented refusal due to fitness concerns as a positive indicator of a strong safety culture within an operation. If they ever audit you or investigate an incident, having records showing you grounded yourself or crew when unfit, that actually boosts your credibility. It shows you take safety seriously.
That's fantastic insight. Almost counterintuitive, but makes total sense. So the memory hook. Saying no when you're not safe, saying yes to professional leadership.
Perfect. Nails it.
And the practical reminder, if they push, I pause. Don't get pressured into a bad decision.
Exactly. Pause, assess, and act safely. And your action plan when refusing should be clear. Always document it. Note the time, who asked, why you refused, e.g. refused flight due to effects of prescribed medication compromising fitness. Then be constructive. Suggest rescheduling or see if another qualified fit pilot is available.
What if they really push back? Supervisor says, you look fine to me, we lose this job, it's on you. After you told them you took cold meds and feel off.
You stand your ground. Calmly but firmly reiterate, my assessment is that my fitness is compromised and it would be unsafe and illegal for me to fly. Then, immediately after the conversation, document everything, the pressure, their exact words if you can remember them, your response. That documentation protects you immensely if things escalate later. Your safety and your legal standing have to come before commercial pressure. Every time.
Okay, let's talk about that documentation, the paper trail, because it sounds like, especially with changes coming, it's not just being fit, it's proving you are fit, Rob.
That's a perfect summary of the direction things are heading. There's a definite shift, particularly highlighted by the new regulatory amendments coming into force around 2025. SOR 2025-70 is the one to watch.
Okay, SOR 2025-70.
Transport Canada is putting a much stronger emphasis on what they call demonstrated due diligence.
Demonstrated due diligence, meaning?
Meaning it's not enough just to be fit anymore. You need to be able to show an investigator or an auditor the actual steps you took to ensure you were fit before each flight. It's about having proof of your process. It demands more proactive self-assessment and, crucially, better record keeping.
So what does that look like in practice? What are the best practices for this kind of documentation pilots should be thinking about?
Okay, so even though the Corys might not explicitly say you must keep an I'm safe log for every single flight right now,
Yeah.
it's overwhelmingly considered best practice, especially if you're doing advanced ops, complex flights, or flying commercially. Keep a pre-flight I am safe checklist record for each mission.
Just tick the boxes or write notes.
Ideally, note the time you did the check and confirm no issues or note any specific considerations. Also log any medications you've taken, even over-the-counter ones, dose and time. And critically, if you do make that call to cancel or delay a flight because of fitness, yours or your crew's record that decision and the reason why.
So it builds a picture of your safety mindset.
Exactly. It demonstrates good judgment, shows a strong safety culture, and provides tangible proof of your due diligence.
Yeah.
In an investigation, that kind of proactive documentation can be incredibly valuable. It's your defense.
Gotcha. So exam prep thinking here. If a question asks if fitness logs are legally required by cars right now, the strict answer might be no for all operations. But the smart answer, the practical answer, is they are super strongly recommended, almost essential for advanced ops, and could be a lifesaver if something goes wrong.
Precisely. You've nailed the nuance. Not strictly mandatory across the board in the text of the current SCARs, but strategically vital. Let's use a scenario to show why. After the incident,
Okay.
you're doing a routine job, maybe inspecting pipelines. Suddenly your drone has a minor technical glitch, GPS signal drops out unexpectedly. It makes a hard landing, maybe clips a fence, minor property damage.
Paperwork nightmare.
Transport Canada launches an investigation. Standard procedure. Now, let's say 2 days before this flight, you legally consumed some cannabis. You felt totally fine on the day of the flight, zero impairment. But crucially, you haven't been keeping any fitness logs. No I am safe checks recorded. What happens?
Oh, man. Okay, so even if the cannabis from 2 days ago had absolutely nothing to do with the GPS failing,
Right. Totally unrelated causes.
there's still a problem. A toxicology test might still show THC metabolites. And without any logs showing you even thought about your fitness that morning, Transport Canada could say you failed to properly assess yourself. It's not just that you might have broken a rule, it's that you can't prove you even tried to follow the spirit of the rules.
Exactly. The lack of documentation becomes a separate issue. Even if not causal to the crash itself, it allows them to conclude you showed inadequate fitness assessment procedures. And that fail you to demonstrate due diligence. That adds to your liability, potentially significantly, which leads us right into the really serious consequences pilots need to understand.
Okay, let's talk brass tacks. What are the actual stakes?
If you're found non-compliant, either flying impaired or just failing to show due diligence, what can Transport Canada actually do to you?
The penalties are no joke. They can be genuinely career-ending. At the sharp end, you're looking at immediate suspension or even permanent revocation of your RPAS pilot certificate.
Meaning you can't fly drones legally anymore.
Correct. Done.
Yeah.
You could also face huge fines through those administrative monetary penalties, the AMPs we mentioned. Thousands, potentially tens of thousands of dollars.
Ouch.
In more serious cases, especially if an accident caused harm, you could face prosecution under the Aeronautics Act. That carries even heavier fines and potentially even jail time in the most extreme circumstances.
Wow. Okay.
And then there are the other consequences. Massive problems with your insurance. They might deny your claim entirely if impairment was involved. And the reputational damage. Losing client trust, public trust, that can be impossible to recover from. And you keep mentioning that phrase, ignorance is not a defense. So even if you honestly didn't know you were impaired or made a genuine mistake, still liable.
Still liable. That's a fundamental principle under the Aeronautics Act. Transport Canada operates with a zero-tolerance approach to safety violations that compromise fitness, accidental impairment, honest mistakes. They don't negate your responsibility as the pilot. You're expected to know the rules and follow them.
So if there is an incident,
If there's any incident, even a minor one, it can absolutely trigger a full Transport Canada investigation. And that investigation can, and often does, include demands for blood tests, urine tests, toxicology screens. They can scrutinize your entire flight log history, your operational procedures, everything.
and that's where the good records come in.
That's exactly where meticulous records become your shield. Having clean, consistent, pre-flight I am safe checks logged. Proof of grounding yourself when you felt off. No recent flights logged close to alcohol consumption. That stuff can be hugely mitigating if something bad happens that wasn't even your fault. It shows you were doing everything right.
This really drives home how serious these regulations are. It's not just red tape. The risks are tangible, real world. It makes all these proactive steps, the self-checks, the documentation, feel absolutely essential, not optional.
Absolutely. It's all about building that robust professional safety culture into every single thing you do with drones, whether it's your hobby or your profession.
Okay, so we've gone deep on the Canadian rules. How do we stack up internationally? Are we ahead of the curve, behind? What's the global picture on drone pilot fitness look like?
It's interesting. It's definitely a bit of a mixed bag when you compare Canada to other major players like the US, the UK, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand.
How so?
Well, as we discussed, Canada is definitely more conservative than the US FAA on alcohol. Our 12-hour rule versus their 8-hour rule under Part 107 is a clear example.
Right, scripter on booze.
But we are very much aligned with places like the UK, CAA, the EU, ESA, and New Zealand in heavily emphasizing pilot responsibility and self-assessment. That focus on the pilot making the call is seen as a sign of a mature safety system.
Okay, so where are we maybe lagging a bit? Or perhaps leading?
Well, arguably, Canada is a bit behind the U.S. when it comes to mandatory drug and alcohol testing programs, specifically for RPS pilots. In the States, if you're operating under certain waivers like flying at night or over people, you can be subject to random testing, much like airline pilots.
We don't really have that widespread random testing here for drones yet.
Not generally, no. It's mostly post-incident testing or sometimes required under very specific high-risk operational approvals. But where Canada is arguably ahead is in proactively promoting that holistic safety culture. The widespread adoption of things like the I Am Safe checklist, the formal encouragement of fitness logs, especially with the new 2025 rules pushing demonstrated due diligence, that feels more proactive than just focusing purely on, say, specific BAC limits, which the FAA does more prescriptively than Canada currently does for RPAS. Our focus is more on ensuring zero impairment, however it's achieved and demonstrated.
That's a really helpful comparison. Gives us context. Now, crystal ball time. Looking ahead, where is drone pilot fitness likely heading? Globally and here in Canada. What should pilots be bracing for, or maybe preparing for, if they want to stay ahead?
I think the overarching trend is clear. Increased scrutiny, increased enforcement, and more alignment with manned aviation standards where human factors are concerned.
So more testing.
Very likely. Expect post-incident toxicology testing to become basically standard procedure for any significant commercial RPAS incident. And I wouldn't be surprised to see some form of random fitness audits or checks becoming more common during Transport Canada inspections down the line, especially for complex operators.
Kind of like truck drivers or airline pilots face now, random checks being part of the job.
Exactly, that kind of integration into the professional expectation. We'll almost certainly see requirements for formal fatigue management programs, FMPs, for larger commercial drone operations just like airlines have, and probably more stringent medical disclosure rules for commercial RPAS pilots.
And technology will play a bigger role.
Huge role. We're already seeing the beginnings of it. Think wearable tech wristbands or patches that track alertness indicators based on sleep patterns, maybe even microsleeps. On-site portable breathalyzers becoming common for pre-flight checks in some companies. Even AI analyzing pilot inputs or maybe facial expressions via remote ops stations to detect fatigue.
Wow, AI fatigue detection. That's futuristic.
It's closer than you might think.
Yeah.
And definitely expect digital IM safe apps, maybe linked to flight logging software, potentially with biometric confirmation or automated data capture, becoming the standard way to document fitness checks.
So for our listeners who are maybe building out their company's standard operating procedures, their SOPs, it sounds like getting ahead of this curve by voluntarily adding some of these fitness tools now would be a really smart move.
Absolutely. That is key forward-thinking advice. If you start building robust fitness protocols into your SOPs, now require formal logged IM safe checks, maybe explore voluntary fatigue tracking tools, document all fitness-related groundings, you're not only building an incredibly strong safety case for your operation today, but you're also positioning yourself perfectly for the regulations of tomorrow. It's highly likely that logging these self-checks will shift from best practice to mandatory requirement for many types of RPAS ops.
And globally, everyone's kind of moving in the same direction towards stricter, more aligned standards.
Yes, definitely. Big international bodies like ICAO and the major regional regulators like EASA in Europe, they're all pushing hard to harmonize human factors rules across all types of aviation crewed planes, helicopters, drones, everything.
Yeah.
So the evolution we're seeing in Canada is part of a much bigger global trend towards greater professionalism, safety, and accountability in this rapidly growing drone industry. Understanding that context helps you see where things are going and why these rules matter so much.
Okay, this has been incredibly comprehensive. We've covered so much ground, from the nitty-gritty of the 12-hour rule to the future of AI fatigue detection. Let's try to boil it down. What are the absolute essential, gotta-remember takeaways from this whole deep dive?
All right, the highlights reel. One, that 12-hour alcohol rule. It's just the minimum. Your actual impairment, how you feel, is what ultimately counts.
Got it. Minimum, not magic.
Two, legal substances, cannabis, prescription meds, even kombucha, can still make you unfit to fly if they impair you in any way. Legal does not equal fly legal.
Check. Legal. Fly legal.
3, your responsibility isn't just for you. As PIC, you're responsible for your entire crew's fitness too.
Team effort, PIC leads.
Right. 4, fatigue and emotional distress. Treat them as seriously as alcohol or drugs. They are major impairments. Use the IM safe check.
Fatigue and emotion impairment. Use I'm safe.
5, documentation is your best friend. Those IM safe logs, recording medication, noting grounded flights, that's your proof of due diligence, especially crucial with the 2025 changes coming.
Document, document, document.
And finally, 6, saying no to flying when you're not fit, even if pressured. That's not weakness. That is the absolute hallmark of professional leadership and a strong safety culture.
Strong professionalism.
Okay, those are solid takeaways. We really hope this deep dive has armed you with a much clearer, more memorable, and genuinely deeper understanding of what being fit to fly truly means for a drone pilot here in Canada. Our whole aim was to hit those aha moments, clear up the confusion, and give you practical stuff you can use on your very next flight.
So here's the final thought to leave you with. Imagine next time you're prepping your drone, you've checked the batteries, the props, the airspace, the weather. But have you truly, honestly completed your personal I'm safe check?
And maybe more importantly, are you genuinely prepared to make that difficult, sometimes unpopular, but absolutely correct decision to ground yourself or ground your crew if one of those letters flashes red. Knowing that your integrity, public safety, maybe your whole certificate, hinges on that choice. It's not just about picking boxes or following rules written down somewhere. It's about actively living and breathing the safety culture of a true aviation professional every single time you power up that drone.